Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where we have a brand new managerial opening in the top flight. Jim Ervin and Ballymena United, they've headed to Splitsville. We ask, was it fair on Ervin for him to be relieved of his duties, and ask who might be in the frame to take over at Warden Street. It's also our annual January transfer window podcast. We're going to preview it all, pick out the teams one by one, and tell you where we think there might be a position of need, and maybe even join up some players who could fill said void. Lots to look forward to on this, your latest weekly edition of Kick and Match. Remember last week when I was talking about the John McCready-McAleary event that was taking place in Belfast on Thursday the 4th of December, and all those people like Barry Flynn and others are going to be there. There's been a change to that because now I'm going to be hosting that event. And Jared Lawler's going to be there. We also have Graham Fitzgerald from the IFA, and it's going to be reflective with Barry Flynn talking about the history of Cliftonville, McAleary, as well as the Irish League. And then we're going to look forward to what the next 100 years of the Irish League will look like. Not that we'll all be around, but we'll try for at least the next 5 with Jared Lawler from Niffle and Graham Fitzgerald from the IFA. And if you're listening to this going, well, that sounds like a decent event I'd like to go to, go onto my Twitter account, Kick a Match 1, and you'll be able to see information. It's totally free to go, and I'm very much looking forward to having big chats. It's what I do in this podcast every week, and on this occasion I'm going to have some big chats with yourself, Matthew Brown. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good, Peter. Good to see you again. Good to be on again. Looking forward to talking all things Irish League.
I'm sure you are. Recent birthday, boy?
Yeah, was I last week. 34, getting old. My wife says I'm going to have to grow up and stop caring so much about a stupid game.
Well, I was celebrating as well over the weekend because I had a wee birthday on Friday, so we can all have a pint on Thursday at Seaton's, which is kind of near the American bar. It used to be called something else, but I forget what that is now.
Sailortown is the area.
Is the area. Makes it sound very hipster. Kind of is. And you can go have a good time. It's one of those episodes where we're starting with the big news. It's all gone Pete Tong for Jim Ervin at Ballymena United. His tenure is over after taking charge of the club after David Jeffrey in the summer of 2023. He was able to help them get survival after a pretty ropey season in his first run. His second season was trying to steady the ship as a part of this reinvigorated investment into the starting 11. That only continued to increase this summer, and with the club sitting in the bottom half of the table, results somewhat all over the place, the board have decided that they need a new man in charge. Unfortunately for Jim, this was his first job in management in football, and unfortunately it's now come to an end at Ballymena. You'd probably say that it's not surprising. It has been suggested on this podcast over the past few weeks.
Yeah, I'm not that surprised, to be honest. I was really surprised when he got the 3-year full-time deal.
That is the interesting note in all of this. Earlier on this year, despite the season not really seemed to have had many fireworks last year, they said, boom, 3 years, you're the man to lead the project. And maybe 6 months later, he's no longer there.
Yeah, well, last year I remember his record when they went in that horrendous. They went in this run, sort of. I think they started off the season well last year, but up to that point, I think he had a really, really poor record. Then he sort of started the season well last year, and then it reverted back to this poor sort of run of games again. And I just was never totally convinced by Jim Ervin at Ballymena. I thought that, it was like he was coming in and steadying the ship and keeping Ballymena in the division and things like that. But then you think back to, the man they got rid of, obviously David Jeffrey, and he, regardless of what you say anything about David Jeffrey. You can say he's yesterday's man. You can say that he underachieved at Ballymena, but I don't believe he did. And I think that he was getting them either in the Euro he was challenging for Europe every year, challenging for trophies every year. He had them challenging for the title, obviously, years ago. It was maybe going back to, it was maybe pre-COVID that year, or even the year before that. So I think that Ballymena were used to challenging, not necessarily for the title, but challenging for silverware and challenging for Europe. So then when Jim Ervin came in and he has seen Dave steady the ship, that's fair enough. You know, Ballymena fans are best placed to make that call. But then from then I just didn't feel like they ever really kicked on. And I felt like this change could have been made last season. And I wouldn't have even been surprised if it had been made in the summer before last season because I don't have the stats at hand, but I just remember his record being extremely poor at that stage. Like he hadn't won very many games. So I felt like, and I said it when we had the live podcast earlier in the season, that Ballymena, when they would make where they would go into a bad run of form, I felt like Jim Irvin was at risk. But I did think that maybe that 3 year deal was the protection on that. But I just thought that I was just never overly convinced by Jim Irvin, and I'm sure I've seen a Ballymena fan describe his dismissal as shooting Bambi because he's a very popular figure at Ballymena and throughout Irish League circles. So it won't have been easy, and it's disappointing to see someone lose their job, but it's a change that I felt had to be made, and you know, especially when you've got, in my opinion, that a ready-made replacement waiting in the wings.
I would agree. Incredibly nice to me in his time. Did plenty of interviews with him, and going into this season, I was pretty clear, in my opinion, that especially with the money that had been invested in some of the players, that top six had to be the aim, had to be the push. And when you looked at the way the league was shaping up about 6 weeks ago, it felt like we had our top four and then pretty much fifth and sixth up for grabs. And this was a perfect opportunity for Ballymena to just go through the gears and brush teams, what would be in the new bottom six, aside and maybe sneak a wee win against the quote-unquote top four along the way. And to start this season, it was looking pretty good. They beat Glenavon, they beat Portadown, they got three in a row, then some of the results didn't go their way, and then they got that September win at home against Infield, and everybody looked up and thought, you know what, maybe this Ballymena team is going to be a wee bit spicy this year. And since then, it's just been a bit of a damp squib. Like they simply haven't got results against top sides, and then they have struggled to kill off teams. They've had 2 draws against Crusaders, who have floundered this season. They're losing to the likes of Dungannon, and on Saturday finally losing to a team who had only got 2 other victories up until then. Glenavon, they're bottom for a reason, and perhaps they are being galvanised under O'Connor, and at home they could surprise teams and get a result. But I saw Ballymena against Crews last week, and it was a frustrating watch if you were someone that was willing on the Sky Blues. Midweek, they go 1-0 ahead against Cliftonville in the Shield, and you know, you blink and you look back up at that game at full time, and it's 4-1 to the Reds. So going away from home and not being able to kill off, because they go 1-0 up thanks to Success Edegan, who needed 2 bites of the cherry to score from a penalty. And I think if I'm to pinpoint why it hasn't went well, is that ultimately the recruitment and the players that they have brought in just are not meshing. He said it himself post-match on Saturday there. They're giving away silly goals. And I like a lot of individually the players that they have, but it just doesn't come together in an 11. Particularly at the top end of the pitch, they don't have the quality that they need. And then there's just too many mistakes at the back, unfortunately. And I think when the money's increased, so does the pressure. And I always thought he's going to have to step up that expectation. And you would probably say, looking at where they are in the table and the way things have been going, it's not my money, but you can see why they're going, we need to change up something here.
Yeah, a lot of money has been spent. You're right, and they've brought in players that, I mean, everyone would rate, like Matthew Clark, who's actually been probably one of the players that has been a relative success for them, certainly in the games that I've watched anyway.
I agree.
But they brought in Darragh O'Connor. I looked at his minutes. He's only played a total of 3 games if you add up all his minutes this season. I don't get that. He was one of the Glentoran's. I think he was second top goal scorer for the Glens in his last season. He did well for Cliftonville before that. Obviously, Ben Kennedy wouldn't have came on the cheap. So they've had a lot of investment there. I was looking at man.
Jarvis, McElhenney.
Yeah, like yeah, all these there's so many you could go through. I mean, I'm sure that there's when you bring in players in from other leagues and stuff too, they do cost money. They do cost more money. They're usually earning more. And I managed to find the statistics going up to because I sent the message to a friend last year going into last season. He'd been manager of Ballymena for 42 league games. He'd won 8, lost 30, and drew 4. Now that was going into the start of last season, and that's a really really tough record. Now that's when the money came in, and I was expecting big things from them last year. And then obviously they started on fire and finished in the bottom half. And then this season, I think so. That's why I was amazed that he got that 3 year deal. But I understand that they wanted to do the whole full time thing. But then it came into the season, and you look at their team, and I have to say, they're the worst team the Glens have played this season. We played them twice and haven't broke a sweat. Like it's been pretty straightforward, and the Glens typically do not blow teams away, but it's been very comfortable both times. And Ballymena have always given us a game. They've always either they've beaten us or they've nicked the point or it's always been a very very tough game. But this year we played them twice, so we played them home and away, and it's been fairly straightforward in both games. And I was watching their game at the weekend, and the defending was just absolutely criminal. And then they just don't have enough up front either, and that's a recipe for disaster. I think they're very lucky that there's a few teams in that league have been absolutely abysmal this season. There could have been a couple of years that they could have been in some serious trouble. I don't think that there will be dragged down towards the bottom two necessarily. I think they'll have enough to get out of it, especially now that they've made the change and should get a bounce.
For some reason, at the back, it just hasn't worked out. Like O'Donnell, Clark, feels like they've been playing in a three alongside rotating cast of maybe Kim Nelson or Dai McCallion, and either it's the midfield that isn't contributing in the same way, or the wing backs are playing way too high up, but they've been able to be got at time and time again, and maybe just don't have that pressure reliever up top. Like you said there, Ben Kennedy was brought in with the idea of a part of a big project, and it's amazing to think 2 years ago he was maybe in the conversation for one of the best players in the league. I know that final cruise season was again marred by injury, but you know what he could do, and maybe that's perhaps the frustration. It's that when you look at the team, it's not that the players individually aren't there, it's that how does it all come together, and maybe are you bringing in a lot of, like, Ben Kennedy is somewhat of a positionless player, isn't he? Like I've seen him being played as a 10, kind of a wide forward, the main striker at times, but not really, like a false 9, and they just don't have the difference makers. And you might say, well, that's because O'Connor's been injured massively, and maybe some other players haven't popped up. But when we're talking about the investment, like, you're even forgetting players like Danny Lafferty and Toure. Toure was highly touted in that he was much sought after his time at Glenavon, and he could have had his pick of a lot of teams, maybe not the absolute top end teams, but he could pretty much walk in and go, someone will want me after my performances last year. And I don't know personally what was going on behind the scenes. Maybe there was frustration, but it's all about rep, isn't it? Because when you look at when David Jeffrey left, there's probably a feeling of, maybe he's not up for refreshing this team, and we need to look at a new angle. And Jim Ervin, and there's been a number of players who've went straight from playing into management and been able to show success. They're close to the league. That makes them oftentimes better recruiters, and they have more of a focus on what the league or football looks like in insert year of football. And I think they probably look at Jim Ervin, and in the back of their mind they think, you don't have the track record of taking a team. This is first job in management, of course, but taking a team beyond where they need to be. That first season they were not in a good position in 2023-2024, but I feel like I want to get up the squad they had. It lacked quality, and then because there has been this quite a quick push off the back of the board saying we never want to go and be in that situation again, perhaps maybe that's where the recruitments went wrong, that they haven't felt like long term and thinking, how is this all going to fit together? It's like, oh, he's good. Oh, he's a quality player. Oh, we'll bring them in. They make commitments on contracts, and then they're just thinking, well, we'll somehow make it work elsewhere, and then you're stuck with players on the bench. And you're thinking, like Ali Gould was brought in the summer, and that hasn't worked out. And look what happened at Glenavon. When your transfers don't work out, regardless if you're the manager being the one pushing to get them in, that's often the poison pill. That's where you're going to fall down. So I think ultimately, and we can get to who might be in the frame for Ballymena next, I think they're probably looking at it going, we need to take the next step. And in my opinion, they'll be going, because oftentimes you go for the complete opposite of what you had previously. I think they'll think, we want someone who's been up around the top of the league before. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what my gut tells me.
They'll want someone who's been up around the top of the league before, someone who's used to spending money as well, I think, because it can be really, really quite a daunting. Yeah, I think that okay, so Jim Irvin's taking all this flack, but they do. Ballymena have a head of recruitment as well, you know. So it's not just hit the manager picking the players. You know, there's a
Exactly.
full team there behind it. So I think they need to have a look at the whole setup and maybe change the whole setup. So it can't all rest on Jim Irvin's shoulders. Looking at the next man, the man on everyone's lips, it's the most obvious choice is Oren Kearney. He is
Yes.
the standout favourite. I was really surprised that Glenavon didn't go for him, or maybe they did, and maybe it just didn't suit him. Now the one thing is they were going full time, obviously, with Jim Irvin. They probably will have to go back on that the part time, but that's fine because their team's part time. And Oren Kearney is a very successful part time manager when you look at what he's done with Corey. And now I know that he's had his ups and downs there, but I really rate him as a manager. I thought that he was pretty hard done by. You know, the way things worked out at Korean, and I know the Korean fans were maybe getting on his back a wee bit. But I think it's easy to forget what he had achieved. He was competing with Glentoran, this you know, so-called juggernaut who got all this cash influx. And I think Korean were finishing above them every season, you know, when Kearney was in as manager. His recruitment was good most of the time, and he had them challenging or winning trophies or challenging for league titles, getting into Europe regularly, progressing rounds in Europe. So I just think it's a no-brainer. They get Oren Kearney in and let him have a rattle at it. Let him bring in his own men. Let him set up. If he wants a head of recruitment, let him bring in a head of recruitment. If he wants to do his own recruitment, then let him do that. Let him shape it and see. And I think that's just simply the most obvious choice. I don't think that I think that, you know, it'd be a massive risk to go for, say, Paddy McLaughlin, who, you know, Glenavon fans just have a horrible experience of his experience there, obviously, and then he had a good time at Cliftonville. But I just think that it's just sometimes it's just the most obvious decision to make, and I think it'd be very silly not to make it.
Just to put an absolute curveball out there, could you see them deciding that they want to maybe make a statement? For example, could there be a situation where you have Jim and Jilton at Cliftonville, who is currently in limbo and is essentially being forced to try and bring together a squad with relatively decent expectation. Like, I know fans understand that they're not going to be knocking on the door of the title, but there's still a feeling of we're Cliftonville, we should be doing better than we are now. And I think, especially recently, I always go back to this, I think he's getting a lot of juice out of the squeeze. But could that potentially be an appealing offer of, hey, we're Ballymena, we are essentially saying we are going to not have the same problem you might be having with Cliftonville? Maybe he's waiting around saying, I'm going to wait until this Canadian money is sorted out, and that could be good and that could be bad. Whatever way that goes, of course. And just goes, you know what? I think I want to take on a team where I can maybe splash the cash. And we don't know how long this... Is it an experiment with money, or is it a long-term investment from those higher up in Ballymena to say that we want to build a team and we know it's going to take cash, but we want success? Could he be a name? I don't see him out there, but they have asked for applications, which can often get ridiculed by some people, but it does maybe highlight who's out there.
Yeah, no, I think application is a good idea, to be honest with you, especially now that the scope of Irish League football has changed so much. And you maybe get outsiders looking at the league, looking at the money available, and looking at the opportunity to manage in Europe. I think that's a massive attraction for managers and players in our league. It's actually not that far fetched that any team in the league can get into Europe, especially the way the League Cup and stuff set up now. I think that I wouldn't see Jim Chilton going. I see Ballymena fans saying that they should go and see if Rodney McAree fancies it. What a brilliant appointment that would be.
I would totally agree. I don't know why, because he would. Because what I was going to say is that there isn't really anybody who would say, "Oh, they're quite exciting." For example, like somebody mentioned Lee Feeney, right? Clearly a name who might be drawing attention because of what he's done with Bangor, but he, in my head, he doesn't really solve the. We want to kind of feel like we're buying something in a manager who kind of knows what they're doing and can help take Ballymena from one end to the other. It's kind of going, well, hopefully you'll be able to rise to the occasion of where we want to go. So Rodney kind of fits in there where he's been within full-time setups and has done maybe the best managing job of, well, outside of Lynch, at least the past 5 years, I think. And everyone can see it, from squad building to tactics.
Yeah, I think that he would be an absolutely fantastic appointment. I think it. I don't know if he would take it. He's certainly not going to apply for it. So that's the thing that you sort of the curveball, I suppose, when you ask for applications. That your manager like Rodney McAree, I don't think is going to throw his hat into the ring, but someone could approach him. There's a manager out of work at the minute that managed Co-Bramblers last season. I did quite well with them.
Yeah, he's got big experience in the league, correct?
Yeah, yeah, and he experienced spending money.
Yep, that's true.
So he might fancy it. You just never know. That would be interesting.
And that kind of leads into what I was saying there about, the Lee Feeney shouts, is that, the talk of whoever you want to say is like the next potential player turned manager, and everybody's talking about Mulgrew and Galt, right? It just doesn't feel like, maybe it is, but it doesn't feel like the job that would go for them. It'll be fascinating if, for example, because I would agree with you on the Kearney thing, it's not too far away, and he might go, I quite like the idea of a team that's willing to invest, and he'll think he'll be able to tinker and tweak this side. The only thing is that there was an exodus out of Coleraine when they decided to go full time, and a lot of those players are currently sitting there with a sky blue contract, and it's a bit like, oh, hello again, ex-boss.
Well, it's a bit like Stephen Baxter, Carrick, I suppose. He bought a few with him as well, and that can work well. So if he's not going in the new surroundings. I'm talking here as if it's happened, but if he was to go in, he'd be going in the new surroundings, but not necessarily new faces. And there's people there he trusts and people there he knows, and that can really help with the settling in period. He's not having to go out, because let's be honest, I don't feel like he's going to have to go out, or the new manager's going to have to go out and buy 7, 8, 9, 10 players for Ballymena. I just think he needs to get the ones working who are currently there, get a couple back to full fitness, and sort of just consolidate their place this season. Maybe try and break into the top 6 or get into the playoff spot, and see where it goes. They're more than capable, and I do think that they will get a bounce from whoever comes in, because they do have a lot of talent in that team. But I mean, it's early, like I say, early in the season when we played them, they were very, very poor. But I watched them against Linfield and thought they were actually quite good. And they've got a lot of experience in that team as well that can really help.
I agree with you. I think whoever comes in, there's probably some players that either have a great reputation or would be considered an excellent player that they're going to have to be quite brutal with and go, I don't know who that's going to be, and say, no, you're not for us. There is some youth there, but they're kind of under-seasoned. Like Joel Thompson, James Hood, Cian Corbally, they're not really influential Irish League players. I think they will be long-term names within this league, in my opinion, who many teams will be sought after. But right now, they kind of just don't have the impact on the game, bar the odd bit of flashes. So there's something there. It's about getting a system and just trying to make it work. The one thing I see in this league this year more than ever is that chaos is ruling. And if you have players that can just make the difference in moments, I know football's made up of moments, that is what's really working. And we will get to players that need to come in, because I said this last week, I've probably said it for ages, that is a team who is crying out for a striker to change things. And Success Edegan got the goal there, got a goal on Tuesday as well. But they just need someone that can hold up the ball a bit better, is passing and link up plays there, and just perhaps have it's a bit more nippy with getting off the shots. I think this is probably just unfortunate for Jim Ervin. Sometimes you go down with management, sometimes you just go down a path and you have to commit to that path to try and see success. And you get so far down it's up to the board to say it's time for us to think again. I look, you always think a manager will be back, but I think he'll be back, but it might just take a step down to go back up again. Like, do you see if there was to be an opening within a bottom six side, would he be a candidate? Bar maybe Carrick because of his time there. I think he probably needs to shine again for a team to maybe give him a go. But there's many managers like that. Hamilton was like that. King was like that, and I think they've dropped down lower than people expected. But I think he's probably a man to take a championship side up and would be a contender for one of those jobs, because I think he clearly has connections within the league and might be better at trying to bring together an Irish League side rather than that weird mix of some players from beyond the league and then some players who can do the business here.
Okay, he will be back. He's very, very highly thought of in the game. And I think that the risk is if he goes to someone like a Carrick, because that's the first name that popped into my head. They're struggling a wee bit, and if Baxter was to go, would they sort of look at Jim Irvin with his reputation of sort of steadying the ship as such, and trying to keep them in the league? Now the thing is, there with him, he then runs the risk of becoming that manager that Sean Dyche or Sam Allardyce, isn't he? Of like he can only be associated with these lower clubs and maybe keeping them up. Is he not better maybe going and cutting his teeth properly, because it's such a high pressure environment in the Premiership when you've got money at Ballymena, and as you're saying, you're having to they adapt to the whole changing landscape and bring in players from different leagues who, I mean, let's be honest, he hasn't watched them every week. He probably doesn't know very little. He probably knows very little about them, and is relying on the opinions of others. He could go down to the Championship, upper end of the Championship, take on a team there and really charge towards the title, cut his teeth properly, bring in some of that experience, maybe players wanting to drop down from the top division, loan moves. I think that would be a really good option for him, and I wouldn't rule it out.
The Irish League, and that's management, isn't it? Right now we want team builders, and I just think he was given a difficult mission there in Ballymena, where they wanted success quick, and the people that they went for just haven't ended up being the ones to do that, or just he couldn't make the players that came in work. But as we saw earlier on this season, you live or die by these signings, and as much as they're good individuals, they just haven't worked. So it will be interesting to see where this all goes. But yeah, I think I'll be very surprised if it isn't Kearney coming in, and if it's not, fascinated about where it goes. I to say this once again, this doesn't. It could be, but this doesn't feel like the club that would go, oh, here's former boss of Alloa without experience in the Irish League. They need Irish League experience for this job, in my opinion.
I would agree.
Let's then briefly talk about the Ballymena game, as we've had such a in-depth conversation about their recent form. They lose to Glenavon, and this is a big result. Anything that, of course, isn't a loss for Glenavon this year is big, but with some results elsewhere and how they're able to come from behind at home, I think this should spook some of the teams above them, that actually Glenavon have the players that could just sneak a few wee goals here if they can tighten things up at the back, and that might be a week-to-week thing. I'm not saying we're anywhere close to the Mourneview miracle here, but 3-1, can they just get better defensively, be more organised? Losing Davy McDade does not help that, but you can see there with Peter Campbell and a few others, they're still fighting this side.
Yeah, certainly. I think that looking at the league table is a wee bit of it's a wee bit skew for the minute. We're back to this here situation where there's like loads of teams with different amounts of games, and you're seeing the nearest team to them is Carrick, but they've got 3 games in hand, maybe or maybe two or three games in hand. Um, so I think that it is an uphill battle for Glenavon, but they do seem to have got a wee bit of a bounce from the managerial change. As is so often. They got one last year with Paddy McLaughlin as well. I think that they have that wee bit of quality. That was a really good finish from Peter Campbell. I felt at the weekend, straight into the bottom corner.
It's the quality he has. It's a few teams in that bottom six have someone like him. It's not, unfortunately, week to week, but he does appear.
Yeah, this is it, and obviously then the announcement, the bombshell that McDaid has left after scoring they put them 2-1 up, scoring the penalty. I know success ended up scoring the rebound, but that penalty was absolutely dreadful. It's really you're really have to go a long way to see a poorer penalty than that. But at least he was sharp enough to score the rebound. Ballymena obviously, but we know how Ballymena reacted to that game. But all eyes are now on Glenavon to see if they can pull off the great escape. Their fans have completely. I feel like the pressure is off because their fans have just completely resigned to Championship football. They're seeing it like the big rebuild. They're able to go down and enjoy a year and come straight back up again. They maybe don't count their chickens. Their Mid-Ulster friends find it difficult. So they need to be careful of that one. But I wouldn't rule them out just yet. I think that
I agree. I really do.
I just think that when you look at the league table, you would be concerned for Crusaders. They seem to get the odd good result, which sort of keeps them out of the conversation. But it was just they could get dragged in by Glenavon. Glenavon could get a couple of good results, and then you're straight back in it. Games in hand, having a game in hand is not points. It's not points on the board. You just don't know what's going to happen. So they will try their very best between now and the window, and then I expect them to be busy enough in the window if they can be.
It is funny though, because I often talk about this with ones I would go to games to, that when you look at a team that's below you, sometimes you're thinking, oh, they're only 4 wins away, and then but if you're on the other side and you're like, oh my, we're 4 points off them. Oh, it's so much. We'll never. And if we lose and they win, they're so far ahead of us. So if you're a Ballymena, you might be sitting there worried that Glenavon are 11 points off the back of that result. But you add 11 points to them, that's Linfield. There's no chance of them catching them in their head. So it kind of works both ways. It's a nice bit of momentum for Glenavon going into like I was saying there last week, to Dave, I think their game, because it's a derby and it's a team that's likely to be around that part of the league, just the emotion of that Boxing Day game could really swing things either way for one of those clubs. It'll almost feel like a bit of a mini cup final down there, because regardless of if these teams get results, I'm talking about Portadown, Glenavon, a win for Glenavon could revitalise them going into January as hopefuls. In turn, a loss to Portadown could pretty much knock them on the head, at least from catching that side. But to stick with Portadown, just because I'm talking about them there, they were looking good going in at half time. 1-0 up, the first team to score past Cliftonville in the league in 4 games, and then the second half, they just failed to come out. But more importantly, because I was at this game for the radio, the Reds got back into their flow, and I'm very excited about this Cliftonville team now. The results are kind of proving that Jim Magilton has finally settled them down a bit, worked on it, and have got a team that is, one, hard to beat, but are also squeezing out goals. The movement they had, Portadown had no answer for. Just watch the way they play a back 3 of Addis, Keeney, and Casey, and the way the balls will be played about midfield, and all of a sudden Jack Keeney's in the other box because he just ran in a straight line, and he is just a dagger, and Keith's doing it on the other side, a dagger right through midfield and defence. And they have these young players who were relative no-names going into this season, but I think by the end of it, we'll be talking loads about Sheridan and Hawthorne. They're a wee bit weak on the ball. Perhaps they just don't have the answer if teams are shutting down the game. But once again, youth is king at Cliftonville, and they really did a number on the Ports in that second half. And it all comes from Sheridan winning the ball, giving the eyes, find the bottom corner, and do they get a bit of luck with a handball? Like, it's very funny. It's Sheridan who plays the ball in the box. Josh Ukek jumps up, it hits the kind of the underside of his arm, and he almost looks at the referee like, sorry, and then he gets, and then the penalty.
I'm surprised he didn't try to hold his head or something.
So Cliftonville, because of how bad they were earlier in the season, people have thought, yeah, they're kind of like with the Cruise, that they're not going to be anywhere near the top four. Look, they're 6 points off Glentoran, having played equal amount of games, but they look like a team in an ascendancy.
Yeah, it's nice for Cliftonville to start picking up a bit of form just before the double header against Glentoran. That's just very, very typical. But I think that Cliftonville are obviously this weird limbo, where you're just you don't know. It's like you read about them in the papers every week, but it's not because of their football. They're unable to really go out there and sign many players. We don't know where they sit financially at the minute. We don't know what's going to happen to them in the future. So Jim Magilton's not fantastic to navigate that situation. He really has. It's to get him back up into the top six. They were looking really in dire straits a few weeks ago. Was following this game, and I seen that Portadown were absolutely flying first half. And I was like looking at all the results, and I was like, some really strange results there today. Thinking Glentoran were getting away with it against the team sort of in the round them. Then things all just changed second half in a lot of the games, including this one. A brilliant goal from Sheridan, I would say. I think that it was very silky, and yeah, I think that Cliftonville, you write them off at your own peril because no matter who they've had over the last couple of years, whether it was McLaughlin or in the Magilton, they've never been a team to go out and throw loads of money about. They've lost some of their top players to other clubs, um, and yet they're always sort of in the conversation. Not necessarily last year, no, it wasn't great for them in the league, but then they won the Bet McLean Cup, and they obviously got through to the Irish Cup final as well. So kudos to them for getting themselves back into that mix. And like I say, it's such a bad time for us to be playing them. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, they just look so well drilled at the minute, and ultimately, I do think that can only get you so far. They're drilled, but also have a bit of thrust to them up top. Because I don't want to be completely talking out of both sides of my mouth, because I'm going to be talking about teams who are probably not overcoached, but are so tactically frigid that they don't have the ability to break down teams, and teams who sit back and have a bit more flat can easily deal with it. You know what? Concern again for Portadown, like they have these random flashes of like a victory against Carrick along the way, but then they like that is a missed opportunity. 3-2, 1-0 up at home. You're doing all right. Maybe could have scored one or two again in that first half, but they shoot themselves in the foot. They don't deal with a young midfielder getting into the box. It's a penalty, and then I mean, if a ball comes into the box, I would probably head it away from a corner. I know the game's almost over, but I mean, Keeney probably couldn't have an easier header. Really, he just kind of had to jump over the player and score. And at that point, you've let yourself down. Like, I was very bullish about this pair, a young pair of centre backs as well, who have a bit of physicality in Alton Top and McKinnon last year, and maybe I just saw something that either isn't there this year. But one clean sheet all season. What does this Portadown team do well?
Yeah, well, it's you look at Portadown's maybe. I'm actually throw it back here. Portadown played the Glens in the first game of the season, and I thought they actually looked fairly decent. And then I've looked at some of their results, and I've been quite surprised. And I think the manager could find himself under a bit of pressure because their next three games on paper should be fairly winnable games. And I think that if they come away from those games, they've got the Cruise, Ballymena. Well, they've actually got Dungannon thrown in there too. So Cruise, Ballymena, Dungannon, and Portadown next four games. You could say Dungannon is maybe the one that is maybe a bit of the toughest one out of that lot. And I think that if they don't get between now and the end of the year a favourable run of results, I do think that Niall Curry might come under a bit of pressure from their supporters. I've already been seeing it online. People saying, that if they get dragged into that relegation dogfight that they like properly, then they need to look at making a change to sort of save their skin. I honestly look at the Portadown team and think it's a wee bit disjointed. I never know what way the results are necessarily going to go. They concede an awful lot of goals. I would be surprised. I think there's only Glenavon have conceded more goals in the league than them. And then there's calls for, there's people are saying that the likes of Ryan Mays is being sort of shut out from the team, and why is he not getting game time? And bit of a strange one.
Is that fair though? Because they've had a very difficult 10 years as a club, and he seems to have been the only bit, or he seems to have only brought one of the few bits of stability with a side who got to the League Cup final while in the Championship. They were second this time last year, and you might say they've had a bit of difficulty with injuries this year. And we saw with Glenavon, sometimes the new bright shiny manager isn't the answer. And I'm not saying there's a lot of them, but there's probably one or two people who support Glenavon thinking, "Oh, probably would have been safer to stick with Gary Hamilton rather than getting frustrated about it." Maybe Portadown are just a lower league team, and this is the man to do it. He usually gets the recruitment right, or at least he has recently. And if they were to change, who are they changing him for? Because Oran Kearney might be at Ballymena. If he is or isn't, I doubt he would be the next in line for Portadown. Is there a clear person? Because I think with Jim Ervin, there was pressure on him because there was people saying, this guy, Oran Kearney, he's available potentially. Like, I know Dave Watt was said about David Jeffrey, and I think he was just kind of poking fun there. But is there anybody, and I know you're not a Portadown fan, that you would go, oh, this could be the man?
Not off the top of my head, probably not. You maybe look down into the championship and have a look and see if there's anyone doing a decent job. That's what they did with Niall Curry before. He was obviously flying at Dundela. Personally, I don't think that he should be under pressure because I think that you're saying, is it fair? Football in supporters' eyes they're just not fair people, are they? They're pretty irrational. Thankfully, board of directors can sometimes be that little bit more astute and sensible. I don't think that Portadown fans should be expecting anything more than sort of to be a bottom six side right now. In a division where there's a lot of money floating about, they don't really seem to have, and you never hear Portadown really splashing big money. I don't know what other players are on, but it's not something that you hear. You don't really hear anyone.
I doubt Shea McCartan is there for nothing.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's fair. Shea McCartan and
And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve that, but
yeah,
they've recruited.
yeah, they have certainly, but not on several players. I suppose throwing money about, like, that's why the pressure was on Jim Irvin. That hasn't happened as such at Portadown, I don't think. But I just think that, would I be surprised if should they make the change if he was to lose three or four of the next sort of 4 or 5 games? No, but at the same time, I think that unless they're in some serious trouble, then they should maybe stick a wee bit and see how the season goes. Certainly, because you forget the thing. I mean, getting into seeing this league, you can, as long as you can stay in touch, the split can change everything. And as long as you can stay there in touch. So unless things go disastrously wrong, or unless, I don't know, maybe the board have told Niall at the start of the season that they really had ambitions for him to finish in that extra playoff place, then maybe they'll decide to make a call. But from an outsider looking in, I think it would be a bit harsh at this stage.
You said getting to the playoffs. The relegation playoff counts. Yeah, like going back to that game, lots to be positive about Cliftonville. Put it down. Josh Ukek's back, and look, I kind of love Ben Wiley at the minute. He maybe it's just that game on Halloween,
Yeah,
where
he's
he was
good.
playing you guys at the Oval. He's got a decent sized body, can move about, pass. Maybe needs to get better in front of goal, but yes, young and often difficult part of the pitch in centre midfield to try and find someone a bit dynamic like that. Let's talk about your Glens Friday night. 1-1 against Bangor. Disappointing, but you have been all over the place recently, haven't you?
We've been all over the place, and I think that the sort of general feel is that they just have not been very entertaining to watch. And when you're losing games and you're not entertaining either, it's a bit of a problem. Now, granted, we've had a couple of games there. The Glens lost their sort of momentum and rhythm with postponements and things like that. And then the game against Portadown, it was I was away with a friend a few weeks ago, and he doesn't really follow Irish football. And he said he watched that game, and he was like, I can see why I don't watch Irish League football because it was abysmal, but you have to understand that the pitch that day was absolutely awful. It was never going to be a spectacle. But then the games after that have sort of followed in the same vein. They've been pretty awful as well. There haven't been many chances. And it's just, I mean, against Bangor in the second half, there was a lot more sort of chances. I actually thought we came out and played a lot better in the second half. Um, I didn't feel like we deserved to go a goal down, but at the same time, I feel like that's the worst goal you can concede in football because it just tells me that everyone's just switched off and you should never switch off. Just a big Route 1 lumper.
It's a good hit though from, and now I think the word's out. Mulvena's a wee bit of a bright spark.
Yeah, it was a good hit, but at the same time, he was. I just think that he should be picked up straight away, and that should never happen. And I just very disappointed by the way we conceded it. I like the fact that we reacted and had chances after that. Realistically, we should have won the game at the end because Pat Hooban missed a couple of chances. But it was overall very, very disappointing, not just in the result, but in the performance. We don't blow anyone away. The Glens don't. In Declan Devine's time at the Glens, the only team we've really hammered was we beat Crusaders, what can only be described as an under 18s team, 4-0 at the Oval. And I think that's really the only, and that was in one of them end of the season sort of pre-playoff games. Other than that, every game, no matter how well we play, is usually won by 1 or 2 goals. So it can be, and they can be pretty scrappy games. So yeah, it's just another one there on Friday night, and you need to sort of get back into a rhythm of winning games quickly, and that was meant to be the Friday night games there. They were meant to be the easy Friday night games against part timers, as a full time team.
He's getting limousines from East Belfast against people on the scaffolding,
Yeah, exactly. And we're meant to be our players are at home all day playing Call of Duty or with their feet up, which obviously we know doesn't happen. But meant to be doing that, and then the next thing they're meant to just turn up all refreshed and smash the bricklayers. But that doesn't really tend to happen all the time. And then now we face like an extremely difficult December. Starting on, well, when this goes out, it'll have happened. The viewers will have most likely have heard the result, but a back to back against a really informed Cliftonville, Lauren, Coleraine, and Linfield. So it's a massive test from now to the end of the season. The one thing I will say is the players really do seem to lift themselves for them games, more so. It suits them being the underdog sometimes, but we'll see. We'll just have to wait and see. I would just like to. There's just no better way that they sort of get the monkey off your back than winning, and no better place to start than a Tuesday night cup game.
I think you've knocked yourself out of the chasing pack for the title. I don't think there was a massive expectation that you would be really serious title contenders come March, April, maybe even February time. But yous were in there, and if yous were just able to kind of hold your nerve against what has been Bangor, Dungannon, and in recent times, I'm not saying these teams should be bowled over by you, but you have the budget, you have the experience, and I think it's hyperbolic to say that, are people looking at Devine, but he clearly needs to try and change something. Maybe he wishes January came tomorrow, but in the same way to Ballymena, is it just the players that you have aren't all knitting together? You seem to lack a bit of pace. You lack a bit of that difference maker outside of Jordan Stewart, and at the back, maybe your lack of pace there is being found out at times.
Yeah, Daniel Armour's a big loss. Signed, solid, good defender. And he would probably be one of the quicker at the centre halves as well. Not known for his pace, but certainly because of his age profile. Um, so he is a loss at the minute. And then you Marcus Kane's now out injured. Obviously, he doesn't have pace, but he's just a very established defender, pretty solid. But our defence in general, our centre halves in general, are all sort of the wrong side of 30. So we do lack pace in there, and then in midfield, it's all a bit samey. The Glens have a lot of midfielders who don't score goals. You've got Josh Kelly and James Singleton and Cammy Palmer, and you've got Liam Burt doesn't score a lot of goals either. He's a good player, tidy player, and they're all good players in their own right, but they're just not a lot of goal threat. Or we haven't had goal threat from midfield since probably Bobby Burns left, and Bobby Burns, and then before him there was Hervoy Plum. It's
You'll never guess what I'm going to tell you.
what are you going to tell
He
me?
is available.
Oh yeah, I don't see it happening. I think he's being linked to Dundalk, isn't he? He's sort of, I think that's a handy move for him. Um, can't see him going back there. But I think that we do lack that wee bit of punch from midfield
Mhm.
because I think that Singleton, super player, and Cammy Palmer is a good player who I really like. Has a good game, bad games as all players, but I think the two of them are a wee bit similar. They're ball winners. But that's Palmer's strength, in my opinion, is winning the ball and picking out a pass. I think he's a very tidy passer. But he scored one goal in his Glenn's career against Linfield, so you're sort of looking for that wee bit more. Another thing is we don't really have, you know, wingers to start every week, so then
Yeah.
you're sacrificing the likes of JJ, like Jordan Jenkins out in the left. We've got a striker who thrives off crosses, but we don't get enough crosses into the box. And the thing about Irish League football is, see, goalkeepers in the Irish League, they really struggle with high balls, high cross balls. They really do. So it's just very frustrating in that regards. Um, we'll see what will happen in January. The Glen squad's looking very full, very bloated. So I think there'll be, if the Glens can get some out, they will get some out in order to get some in. I don't think you'll see any of those early signings this year like we were seeing last year, or wrapped up a few League of Ireland signings in December. I just don't think that will happen.
Fair play to Bangor. They get the goal, hold tight. I think you were knocking on the door, but unfortunately just couldn't make it happen late there. That could have been the situation for Linfield on a different day against Carrick Rangers at home. Go ahead, let Carrick back into it. They're a bit feisty, Carrick. They have this in them, and they have plenty of chances throughout this game to maybe take advantage of this back line for Linfield, which just looks so naive and just lacking that killer instinct at the back. But it's a few mistakes at the back for Carrick, and it's a nice little double goal for Yates, a player who hasn't really made much of an impact so far for Linfield, but with Offord seemingly out for let's not talk about it long, it's a positive that they have something like that. But again, you could hear with 20 minutes to go the boos ring out at Windsor Park when it goes to 1-1. However, they do what they've done in previous years, in years where it was Linfield vintage. They eventually turn on the burner and get the points.
Yeah, this looked like a really intriguing game, a good game. I read what Linfield fans say, and they say that the Linfield are abysmal to watch at all times, and that's fair enough. I get that, but I think that this game of the weekend was certainly a bit more entertaining. Now, they wouldn't have found it overly entertaining because Carrick had an absolute bucket full of chances themselves. Now, Gartside did make some good saves for Carrick too, so Linfield did have their chances. So it seemed pretty end to end. When Carrick were scored their goal, they look to be on top. I only seen highlights of this game, and they look to be on top. So I think that Linfield, when I seen the results, I looked at the results on Saturday, and I thought, there's Linfield drawn, Lauren drawn, Corrine had just got one up, but I thought the Glens are maybe going to get off the hook here a bit. But then David Healy will have absolutely loved the way that game ended, because managers absolutely love it when they bring a substitute on and he makes a massive impact. They love it. That is their vindication. So I think that he'll have really enjoyed that. And I think that Carrick will be very disappointed that it ended the way it did. I think that 3-1 was maybe a bit unfair on them.
Yeah, but I mean, they probably should have done better for the second goal, and then it's a big sweeping move. That's what Linfield need to do. Use that pitch a bit more, and I like Taylor on that left hand side, and Morrison looked like he was having his moments throughout there, and they're probably going to have to rely on him a bit more with Offord being out. And like I said, we will talk about maybe some areas that they'll need to improve on in January if they're trying to solidify their own title charge. But it's clear there's one team that are not, let's just say, running away with it, but they call them lucky, call them consistent, call them whatever you want. They don't care, because Larne are taking care of business in the way that they did during their title double, and that is game by game, keeping tight and being super efficient. Getting a penalty, pretty much in injury time. I wouldn't say that's a game plan, but they just kept going for it. And with those attackers coming off the bench, they're a full-time team. There's not going to be many other teams that have the type of arsenal they have. But it's really working for them. They are getting so many late points, late results, because they're able to change it up late on with a McGee or a Lusty.
Yeah, I mean they do have a dearth of. I did say to be fair in the live pod that it was like I wasn't entirely convinced. I think they had a lot of players who were sort of on the periphery of being really good up front, but they were missing Ryan this season. So I thought that they were going to maybe struggle for goals, but they've keep just putting it out of the bag. Having players like I would kill for a Lusty or an O'Neill off the bench. Although I don't think there'd be too many teams in this league where they would be on the bench, to be honest. I think that that's just and this is the thing. See, when you're playing football, them Dungannon defenders must look to the sidelines when they see them numbers go up, and that must put a bit of fear into them as well. And it all comes down to a wee bit of mentality. And I think that happens with a lot of teams because Lauren do score like late goals, and that is, I do think that's down to the opposition as well as them. But it was they'll be absolutely thrilled with the victory.
Nobody, especially when you've been able to make it 1-1, nobody wants at home to lose to a last minute penalty. And good goals in this, must be said. Obviously, you can't really go, oh, what a great penalty. But it's nice work to win it. And before then, Mr. Stephen Scott, I think he's an underrated player with a wonderful hit. And on top of that, Randall, he is probably one of the more underrated or forgotten players himself within this league. But time and time again, he is making the difference for Larne in big moments. It just gives them the edge in games where perhaps without that goal, without that nice little assist, they could be a bit more vulnerable. He kind of is a barrier to that in big moments.
Yeah, I really like Mark Randall and always have done. I think that he's been a great player for Lauren. Just signed the new deal.
Like he's the midfielder you are talking about.
Yeah, well, he's a midfielder. I mean, if you listen to the rumours, that Mick McDermott tried to sign him as Glentoran manager on a couple of occasions. I think that he's exactly what we've needed. And he knows a bit of dark arts in the game too, which is never necessarily a bad thing, I think. It gives you a bit of bite. I think that you said about the Stephen Scott goal. I seen actually Dungannon when I was looking last night on their Twitter. I seen that they said they're putting it in for a Puskas Award nomination. It was an absolutely sweet strike. That's one of my favourite types of goals. See, you would just take a wee touch and
Wind
then
up,
absolutely bury it.
bang.
Oh, unbelievable! It's class.
Well, final game to wrap up here, and it's in North Belfast. Coleraine get back to winning ways. Like their form table is stinking at the minute, but they get a win against a plucky Cruise side, and they leave it late to kind of put a bow on it here for Coleraine, but they won't really care overall. They look to have found their stride a wee bit in this game, and realistically, they just needed to get a win on the board again and to get going. Cruise look bright. They look to have something up top that maybe other sides at the bottom don't have. But there's something about that Glacken goal that's just horrendous.
Yeah, I seen Declan Goodell come out in the press and say, this was a really good performance from the Crews because you look at them earlier in the season and Corian beat them 4-0 and they didn't lay glove on them. Now, granted, here, I have only seen highlights of this game, but it looked again to me that Crews didn't lay glove on them. It looked that it was a pretty straightforward 2-0 victory for Corian. Maybe the highlights don't tell the full story. But I just think that Corian would have always had too much for the Crews here. They're in a sticky situation. But as you say, the attacking, Fraser Biden's an absolutely, I don't know where they pull these players from. You would think that he had some sort of career in Scotland that can get dealt with the players he pulls out from over there. But he came out, as I say, he came out in the press and he said that he was really, really happy with the performance of things like that, or he's happy in the trajectory they're on. But I just don't. I think that that's maybe just press talk from him. I think he will be panicking a bit. I think he's going to expect a bit more from his players. I know it's a young team, a lot of changes and things like that, but it's very strange to see them where they are.
You know what? I've been very hot and cold about the Crews this year, and look, I agree that they're probably one of the more weaker sides at the back, and as I pointed out numerous times, don't want to be my catchphrase every week, but midfield wise, they're a soft touch. However, they have something that other teams around them don't have, and that is a front three of Brooks, Bryden, and Dunlop that are good off the ball, running, and when they knit up together, they're causing pressure. Problem is, it feels like it only happens for like 10 minutes every game, and then the rest of it, they're a bit anonymous, which is a problem. But in my opinion, if they can just hold tight against the Glenavons, Portadowns, Carricks, and maybe even say Bangers, they'll probably be able to squeeze out a goal or two, and that will see them rise up the table. In turn, I can see them just being ever so close in all those games and just languish near the bottom. I think they've got a big run-up coming here, but at home to Coleraine, and then there's only 1-0, I think it was, against Linfield. Maybe it's more than
Linfield?
that.
No, it was 1-0.
That's a good platform to start off with, but we've seen this time and time again in this league. Good performances mean nothing. It's all about results. And Crews may fall down as one of those sides that just don't get results. It's a bit of an annual tradition here on the podcast, aka I did it once and you've liked it. It's the January transfer window preview. We're going to quickly go team by team, and you will get annoyed because we didn't say the position or the type of player that you need for your side in the top flight. It's funny because what I probably don't know about these sides is that like some teams already have like full squads, so they'll need to be like an exodus of 1 or 2 players above the age of 21, isn't it, before they can sign people. But when I went through this, I didn't see many sides where I was like, oh, that's a really tough one. Maybe you had a different experience.
Yeah, well, it's the rule is under 21 or at the club for more than 3 years before their 21st birthday. So that's the rule. So it can be, so it's going to be, unless you were to go through your squads with fine tooth comb, it's probably going to be quite difficult for you to know off the top of your head. I found,
for example, Jamie Mulgrew is kind of like a non-existent player for Linfield.
Yeah, exactly. The Glens have a few as well, and the sort of people always think that though the Glens are well over, because I think we got 27 in our squad, but there's like a few there who, aren't registered as club trained players. Or are, sorry, registered as club trained players. I found this tough because obviously, so I predominantly watch Glentoran, and I would watch highlights of other clubs or the clubs that are on TV. And it depends on what they produce when they come up against us. So if you're asking me, for example, about Dungannon, I'm looking at Dungannon and I was like, well, why do they need to sign anybody? Because they just come up against the Glens and they beat us.
That's true.
So
some teams I look at it and go, you probably need a bit of depth more than anything.
Yeah, but the best way I go to look at it is read what some of their fans say, because they watch them
And
every
steal
week.
their opinions.
And even then, sometimes they can talk rubbish as well. But also you sort of, the league tables tell them, simply goals for, goals against, and chances created and things like that. If you're watching the team and it's all pretty dull, flat, and boring, then I can tell a story. So it was tough, but I went through it and I gave it a go, and we'll see. And there'll be a lot of slabbering, no doubt.
No doubt. We'll start at the top because they're probably the ones that need the least. Lawrence probably in there. We talked there about how much up front they're well stocked and they've got quality. You would probably say the same at the back for them because look, 8 goals conceded all season. That's 1 goal in every 2 games, and they're decent enough. There's a few young players coming through, which is good. I think if they want to solidify anything, and sometimes at the top, it's weird because the kind of pipeline in the Irish League is totally a mystery now of what type of player can move to a certain club. In previous years, I feel you could go this player, that player, will not be able to totally go, this is the player who they maybe should target. It's probably an archetype. But I probably look at it and go, is it maybe midfield for them? Because nets are grand, centre back. They've been without Bulger this year, but they seem to be doing all right. There's another midfield piece because Miller just isn't fully back for them, and with that, can they really rely on Randall? I know they have a lot of times, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for them just to have that one extra, maybe kind of development type player to have fire in the midfield and fire it on late to see if you can maybe make a difference.
Do we know how long Dan Bent is going to be out for? Is he's in,
That's
you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
he's injured, so if he's going to be out for a long time, they'll miss him. He's been probably their best signing, if not player this season. In the times that I've seen them, they've obviously fully fit Andy Ran is going to be cliche alert new signing. But I think that yeah, midfield could be something for them. I'm really surprised. I'm surprised at how well they've done defensively. I just thought with Sean Mont and Kane Bulger like missing out in those two, I just really thought that they conceded a lot more goals this season. They've done brilliant to be able to just keep that so tight at the back. That's been so impressive. I've been really impressed by them, to be honest with you. And
I think it just shows you that Aaron Donnelly is such a well established campaigner in this league that he kind of just helps everything else feel so much more shored up. Yeah, they might not have the absolute barnstorming names, and maybe you're right. A nailed on, not Johnny Addis, right, but a well experienced type player in the Irish League probably wouldn't hurt. Maybe that's where you go just to shore things up at the back and add a bit more. Do you really want because you've got a few wing backs there like Sean Graham and stuff like that. But yeah, maybe that's what I would go for, an experienced campaigner at the back or some random boy that's played for Notts County for the past few years. And
I have it written down. They'll probably sign someone really random from England or Scotland.
yes, League Two Warrior 33, and that will get them across the line to the end of the season and play around like 5 years in this league. Zipping down, Coleraine, as much as you would say recently results haven't been right, it's not a squad that you would say they need to add more
No.
to, because they do have quality, and perhaps the amount of players they brought in has been not a part of their downfall, but it has led to maybe a lack of fluidity in the same way that you would have with other teams.
I am just getting a whiff of Glentoran 2019-20. Whenever we went out into the January transfer window, sitting in a very similar position to where Corey and are now. I think we went top on Boxing Day or just before Boxing Day, and we beat Linfield that season 3-0 on Boxing Day. I think it set us at the top of the table. In January, we ended up signing like 5 players, and it just upset the balance of the team. And then we started falling down the table. And I just feel like I read today in the paper Rory Higgins saying that like with the January transfer window is so important for Corey and it'll really define their season. He said that I know we've done business, but so have other teams, by the way. He was sure to get that in. But they need to do more, sort of thing. And I was just really quite surprised. I just thought that maybe it's supposed to be a bit of like consolidating, rounding up the troops and getting on with it for Corey, and that they've got so much quality in their team already. The one thing I would say about them is that their defense, maybe they make a lot of defensive substitutions.
They do.
That's the one area of the pitch that I never want to see a player taken off, especially at centre half. Corey Lance Foster seems to get subbed off every week. I just think that it's very bizarre. So I just don't think he trusts his defence. So I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe made 1 or 2 additions in there. They certainly don't need firepower. And I think their midfield looks very tidy as well. But he wants players, as does any manager. Is going to want, if you've given a blank checkbook, you're going to sign players. But I just think that could really upset the apple cart if they go and try and just got this team settled, and then the next thing they're just going to throw loads of new players in.
You might go in a dream world, you put somebody else in nets that's a bit more experienced, like having a teenager in goals, despite him being from Newcastle isn't harsh from.
Yeah.
But again, I've not signed about 80 keepers this year as well. Maybe you just have to stick your twists there. You do look at their midfield, I think, and as much as Patching stands out and Boyle beside him, Ronan Doherty is a player that kind of rotates in. Outside of that, I mean, I know we were talking about him earlier on, and I said last week, and he's been touted for up there. It's probably a difference maker, and is Bobby Burns not kind of a different that style of player, not the type of difference maker they could maybe do with not a number 10 because you've got that in Glacken, but a bit more of a rampaging 8.
Yeah, well, apparently I heard someone say or seen someone say that Bobby was up getting the tour of the showgrounds earlier in the year, and I expected him to end up there. But talk is that he's signed for Dundalk. But I think that
but even if it's not him, a
that
style
sort of
that
player
wouldn't be the worst.
Well, I think their midfield is pretty pragmatic in that you look at the individuals where
I know you can't add another attacker.
Yeah, I know exactly. This is the thing. So their midfield does a job. Whereas if you're taking out one of those guys and then putting in another midfielder that's almost like a 10, or you're then maybe leaving yourself a wee bit exposed, and it's sort of like it's just not going to work out that way. Is it just going to be a bit much? I don't know. It sounds very exciting, doesn't it? But it's like, is it football manager stuff? You just
It is.
you just need to be careful, is what I would say. But Roy Higgins will know more about football than me, I'm sure.
Did you go centre back or striker for Linfield?
I actually thought that Linfield would need a left back as well, because their fans all say it. They all say that they need an out and out sort of left back in there.
Surely they can just play Kirk Miller there and it's fine.
They love that, don't they? They absolutely love that.
He's usually right back, but just play him at left back instead. It's fine.
So the offered injury throws a spanner into the works. There's talk of Callum Morrison going back to Scotland in the new year, on loan. Maybe that's changed now that Offord's been injured. I think that they will certainly look to bring in a, a defender if they can get one. And I think they'll look to bring in a forward as well. But I think the most sensible thing for them would be looking at fullbacks. But I'm not sure if they will.
Yeah,
I'm not crying out for it, but I just think their fans would like it.
yeah, no, I know what you mean. And Glennie's probably a player you think, why hasn't he kind of found his way there? It's not an area where I think they're screaming. I think they're just happy for this weird collection of centre backs. Again, maybe they could do with just a real stonker, some guy that's maybe 23 and just isn't working out at some club in Scotland, coming in and just, a bit like Charles Dunn last year was for Coleraine, where everybody's going, wow, this guy's one of the better defenders in the league. As much as they have bodies, maybe that's the type of thing they shore up. Could it be midfield just with, can they continually to rely on Mulgrew? Perhaps maybe there's an argument to be said there on top of, they do have Isaac Bird, as Archer out at the minute. Kind of Charlie Allen's getting a bit of a run, but he's kind of an attacker. So maybe you would say, again, experienced midfielder. Is there anybody, for example, if you were to go, right, they need a striker because they're going to play McKee somewhere else, and someone needs to be the Matthew Fitzpatrick second striker. Is there anybody within the league that you could go, that's the person they're going to go for? And is the reason you're not going to say Brighton is because it just feels like they're copying and pasting what they did with Alfred last year?
Well, he is going to be the obvious one. I think that he will turn a lot of heads in the January window. And the Crews will. Like, I know Goodell's in the paper last week saying that he's not for sale, he's not going anywhere. They might have to look at it, if a silly offer comes in. However, I'm not too sure if Linfield will do that again. I think by all accounts they spent a good bit of money last January on two forwards. I'm not too sure that they're that desperate for a forward. We don't know. Maybe Offord's going to come back sooner rather than later, and maybe that's why Healy doesn't want to say anything. You made a good point about a midfielder though. I think that their midfield, and I looked at the midfield at the start of the season, I thought that it's a bit old or a bit slow. And then obviously they lost Shields, who's massive influence in there. Isaac Bird hasn't really hit the heights for them that they were expecting. And it's just, I never really know who's going to start midfield for Linfield each week, which is unusual because they were never really like that.
A league, yeah, totally. A League of Ireland centre mid. I know they've done it before with Shields, but some player none of us have really ever heard of, but is like 29. Feels nice. Like I think they're going to try and develop Isaac Bird as a player, but yeah, maybe just somebody else that can do something. What I'm going to point to the player I like in Ben Wiley, but I just don't see that. Why go into a team you're not going to start in? But maybe you want to go into football. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a Linfield player. But yes, maybe midfield is probably the sensible one. You then go to your boys. Is it just winger, or do you have another view?
We need pace at the back. I would love pace in defence. I don't know if we're going to get that, where we're going to get it from. Like I say, our squad, there will have to be outgoings for the Glens to bring players in, because we're just not going to have a squad of near 30 people. Even if we do have room in the squad, we're not going to have this huge squad of players. So you could maybe see the likes of Charlie Lindsay going out maybe somewhere on loan, although he wouldn't take up squad space anyway. Nathaniel Ferris might move on. Player Chianker,
Yes.
yeah, he's
Player I'm going to mock to everybody else.
he is a player who came up a lot in the live podcast. as you know, everyone, there's so many teams in the league. Ferris could go there, Ferris could go there. I think that the Glens would love one winger, if not two, and a bit of pace at the back. And to be honest, I would definitely take Ben Wiley off Portadown's hands. But as you say, if it's just maybe a wee bit more of a goal threat, the Glens rely heavily on goals from their strikers, and if that doesn't happen, if they don't score or if Ryan Cooney doesn't score, then generally we're not going to score. So it sort of I would love us to get someone who is either going to be a threat from goals from midfield, or is going to be a bit more creative. You know, someone who just going to spark you a wee bit more. Um, because that we,
If
we lack that a bit.
if I offered you 2022 Tiernan O'Connor, would you snap my hand off?
Yeah, probably would. Yeah, I would probably anyone who can sort of add that wee bit of you see him up in and around the box, and you're thinking he could do something here. Whereas we've got too many players who get into that position, and they're like, "Where's the pass?" You know, and that's frustrating. I love players who are direct. We don't really have that from our wingers either, because even the wingers we do have, they sort of go up the line and they just try to cut in and find a cross, or they'll never really just charge, bear down on goal. And some players get inside the 18-yard box and look for a pass, and it can be very frustrating.
I would say for Cliftonville, it's probably a striker.
Yeah, well, I have Cliftonville down here as they clearly they would love a top drawer centre forward because they have done really well to adapt after losing
Oh,
he
but there's just so many.
but yeah, there's so many teams looking. As
Look at one.
yeah, there's so many teams looking one. If you could build one, you'd make a fortune. Linked with Fraser Bryden, that sounds made up to me. I just don't see how that happens. You know, I just don't see it. Not in the current form, not in the current sort of landscape. Like the crews are going to be looking massive money. Um,
Yeah, like Bryden is like scoring that many goals this quickly. I'm not saying it's 100 grand, but it's
it is.
over 50, isn't it?
It's over 100. If you look here and
He's
offer
not. But then that's like I was gonna say he's probably not worth that. But
the
again,
going rate.
who's
You know,
it's where the conversation starts.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly, yeah. That's the going rate. Because Europe is worth so much money to teams now that if you can get a striker who's going to get you into that European spot, that's what money is worth. I just think that they we were talking about earlier on. They are a team that have very solid foundations, sort of in defence and in midfield at times. Um, they can maybe have players who are a bit off it sometimes, or can do silly things like Oren Casey, for example, can throw himself into the mix and cause his team to maybe lose it from a winning position at times. But I think that they will be looking for that centre for the next Joe Gormley. Maybe they'll go and sign someone from the the championship or lower down the leagues or something like that. Like he or some sort of youth player who played for Northern Ireland, like the JD Sports Academy when Jim Magilton was
Yeah.
there about like 6 years ago.
See, I think for them, there's an argument to say that they probably just need someone that's a bit more seasoned than that for them. I was surprised there was talk of Brian Healy from the Championship maybe popping up around there, and perhaps they just don't need that with what they've got at the minute. But clearly he can score goals. He's not really a striker. You do look down at the Championship. Jed Donnelly is that a player that I
Yeah,
don't think he's gonna return, despite the fact that he is tearing it up in the Championship, which is not really a surprise.
no,
So unless they are taking a punt on one of these random younger players who've got the goals and likes of Igor Rakowski, but I kind of like the idea of like a Dara Stewart or something going there, despite the fact that they maybe might not be ready. Like, I don't think he's going to go, right? But if we were talking about Irish League 2012, Ben Arthurs is being linked to Cliftonville, isn't he?
yeah, yeah, probably RC 2012. Um, I think that is probably an obvious one. Several years ago, he's just signed a new deal, didn't he? Didn't he? So I just don't see that sort of happening now. Late 20s. new deal of Bangor. They'll not want to let him go too easy. Here's the thing these days about Irish League football, Peter. It's like we can sit here and talk about players that they might sign, but they're not. They might not come from within our league, and we might not be on our radar.
A wee Y
Like,
Scout
well, exactly. So
hero.
the Glen signed Ryan Cooney from literally our analyst found him on a scouting network, like found him on Y Scout. So you're looking at players like, and he's been super for us this season. You know, he's probably been one of our best players. He's certainly been in the running for Player of the Year if it ended now. So they could be looking at things like that. You know, these analysts and recruitment teams have a whole different scope nowadays, as opposed to just relying on, okay, there's Ben Arthur scored a lot of goals this season. He's done well. Let's go sign him. So we can name positions, but it's very difficult to pick out players.
I would agree. It's probably the same, I would say, for Dungannon. If we were to just stick with Cliftonville there, I mean, I don't think that Glentoran would want to shimmy over Ferris to them, but I think maybe this doesn't suit exactly what they're doing, but it's definitely the kind of difference maker that might be appealing short term for them, in the sense that they don't have someone of that same kind of frame. Maybe you'd argue Brandon Birmingham as a bit of that, but that just hasn't totally gelled with them either. So yeah, again, someone like that wouldn't go amiss. I mean, for the Swifts, you said it. It's hard to look at that side and go outside of going, well, they would take Kirk Miller. Clearly, it's who's in the market, how do they get there? Like, they are kind of reliant on Junior to stay fit, and they've been without Mitchell for a while. It's a team that maybe could do with just taking a gamble on a second striker somewhere, and it might be the Championship, because I don't know if any other side's going to loan them somebody. Like Lusty isn't going to be available to them. So do they go out and just try and fill that bench up with players that maybe just seem like they can contribute more to this season than the future?
The Glens have some very talented young strikers at the club, who could, you know, players like Cal Weatherup, who maybe Dungannon would like to bring in on loan. Now, our seconds are actually flying this season, so maybe they'll not want to sort of break up that sort of team. But someone like that, and Dungannon are very fond of that. You know, they're very fond of signing these young players on loan. They've done it for a long, long time. Um, and then, or again, I mean, Nathaniel Ferris might be available on loan, but if the Glens need to get players out, you know, then that is an option, as well. That is what I've got written down here, is that Dungannon have really struggled to replace the goals of John McGovern, as anyone would. And that is probably the area that I would look at. I was looking at their goals for column, and it's pretty low. I think it's amongst the lowest in the league, maybe outside of the bottom two. But they everywhere else in the park, a really good mix of youth and experience, as Dungannon just seem to have always had in my entire time of them being in the top flight following Irish League football. They just have this really, really good balance, this conveyor belt of young talent that all seem to be absolutely massive. And just come out of nowhere and do really well. So I think that they'll not be worrying too much, but if they can find a goal score.
Yeah, it's called being a well-run club. You look at it and you see the midfield four, and it's a box midfield usually. It can be anybody from Knowles, Alves, Bigorama, Kelly, Dillon. But then you look at the bench. You know, they have Maguire to come on. Malky Smith's a decent bit part player. Bobby Jack McAleese is a player that, you know, has shined at times, but, you know, is still in the development curve. There's Andy Mitchell coming from the bench. So you look at McCarran and Liggett, and you think, well, those are youth players, and maybe you'd want to put someone with a bit more nous in there. So I think it's an opportunity for them to try and roll the dice on a Galvin, I know he's out, or a McGovern style forward who can run with it, that doesn't mind not starting right now. That's who I'd go for. But again, where are they coming from? You take one step down for Bangor, I think they would be calling up everybody. I don't know how many loan spots they still have, but they're calling up Linfield, they're calling up Coleraine, they're calling up Glentoran, going, give us your youth, please. Because they're probably looking to find a player who wants game time, they can give them game time, and they might go, let's just stick around here next season.
Yeah, well, they've seen it before with young Ben Cushney. We sent him on loan to Bangor, and he went there. He stayed there, and he's done really, really well. So I think that they could certainly do something along those lines again. They'll be absolutely delighted with how their season's going. They're not going to be looking at that. They're probably looking at bringing players in to consolidate their place rather than looking at looking above them. But I'm sure Linfield probably have plenty of young players in their academy. They seem to have someone that moves over to England every single year for a six-figure sum. So I'm sure that someone there might fancy some game time. The Glens certainly have a number of players there who are really doing well this season. We also have, like I said before, Charlie Lindsay, who's not getting any game time, very capable player. James Douglas, who isn't getting any game time.
Remember Jamie Douglas? That's who it is. Jamie Douglas.
Yeah,
That's who I would stick in the Bangor.
he did really well last season. He got taken out of the team because when a player at that age plays a lot of games, you take them out of the team if they're starting to win a wee bit and protect them. But he hasn't really hit. To me, he made maybe one appearance or something this season. Um, so yeah, I think that you could see maybe someone like him go out and loan, and Bangor is a really good place for him to go if they're in need of a midfielder.
Yeah, it's centre midfielder or well, look at anybody. I think they can maybe put up most positions where they're like they can give it a go or have a rotation there. But again, if there's maybe a younger centre back from a side that isn't getting around, that wouldn't be the worst just to have as a backup for the likes of Owens and co. But yeah, either. But I love Jamie Douglas to Bangor. Absolutely love it. That's a great shout. Ballymena, I've said it for weeks. This is the easiest one I did. Get them a striker. Ferris is probably the one they're going to target. I would expect.
Well, like I say, he is available. I would say. I think.
You might go Lauren in one of those strikers, but I think Lauren are going. These players are doing too well for us. Why would we send off a Benji McGee or O'Connor starting at the minute or Lusty or whatever? I think they would happily just keep on going. There's talk there. There's a big bid for Shevlin. I don't think that's going to change. Like I look at Jimmy McGonigal and he kind of enters my head of could he fit in one of these sides below Ballymena? And I think the answer is yes. I just don't know if Ballymena's the one, but I think they would take him. Or at least give him a go. But I think they maybe want something a bit more. No one's really locked in safe, right, at that level. But, McGonigal comes with a few more concerns just due to lack of game time.
He always seems to do well when he signs for a club, Jamie McGonigal. So that could be a really good option for sort of this end of season spell. As I say, I think Nathaniel Ferris is someone who's going to be probably getting a lot of attention because as far like if he's not getting games at Glentoran, he's going to want to go play games, and the Glens are going to want to create space, I imagine. So I think that he is a loan option. So it's not much of a gamble for teams if that is an option for them. McGonigal is another one. I forgot all about McGonigal, to be honest with you. I
Puts
think
himself in the shop window with that goal.
Yeah, certainly. But he's not getting. He just hasn't. You've barely really see him make many appearances these days. Understandable. I mean, the dearth of attacking talent they've got there. And again, they could maybe go somewhere in League of Ireland, or really depends. It's hard to know until you see who's taking over.
Yeah, totally. But I think if they can, they should try and get someone with a bit of Irish League experience, or they're rolling the dice once again on players like Success Edegan, who again not to focus on him, but he's the only one I can talk about here. They just like all the chat before preseason was Paul O'Neill. I don't think that's even relatively a hope unless they decide to break the bank. Someone to even pair that with the wild card, I think is the way to go to Ballymena. I probably like, even though he's more that kind of big body striker like Edegan, I kind of like that as something to lay off these other players, be it Kennedy, O'Connor, Hood. That's the guy. It's probably the same for Portadown. Like it's just up top. It's been the Eamon Fife show this year, and he's never really struck me as a forward, out and out kind of striker. But like he's getting the goals just from a physicality and player point of view. Albeit I can see him link up quite nicely. So they're also in the Nathaniel Ferris, Jim McGonigal territory. Has anybody asked what's up with McDade at Linfield?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's just signed him to do photo shoots, to be honest with you, and kept them on to do so. I think it Ported Down are maybe going to also be looking at maybe they could maybe look at defensive reinforcements. There's a lot of chopping and changing in that Ported Down defense, which again, going back to what I said earlier on, makes me think that the manager doesn't trust his defense, which is not ideal. So I wouldn't be surprised if you were to see them bring in a defender as well, just to sort of shore things up a bit. They leak a lot of goals, and that isn't ideal. But it, and everyone's going to be looking for a striker. So if you can maybe just if you can find if you've got a budget, a set budget, and everyone's going for the strikers, and therefore you're only going to just go and take one for the sake of it because you need a body, you're maybe better taking that budget and putting it into somewhere that not everyone's looking, which would be maybe a command and centre half should they become available.
I like weirdly McGonagall for them because Ubacan seems to have been injured for a bit. I can see UKEC being more of a striker. He's wearing number 9 at the minute. And McGonagall can kind of be a wide forward and play as a striker. If it looks as though Annette really hasn't played out well there, despite starting a couple of games for them. So, yeah, maybe. Like they've got a few midfielders. Like, look, all the teams around here could do with bodies. I go to the Cruise here, and it's something I've been waiting to say. It's a kind of a Joe Crow style midfielder, but not Joe Crow. But also, if it is Joe Crow, that's not a bad shout either.
I think they need some serious experience at the back as well. I think that they're really
They do, yeah. Well, that's true, but that feels like the hardest part to get. Like, it's because they don't feel like someone that's gonna be able to go, hey, decent wage to come here and give it a go. Experienced centre half. So where on earth does centre half experience
here.
come from for a team like the
We've loads of
Cruise?
them at the Oval.
You giving me Kieran Cole across the road, are you?
I think that League of Ireland's a good shout for an experienced centre half or defender in general who you want to come in and do a job for you because I mean let's not dance around the fact that League of Ireland is a far higher standard than what the Irish League is. And I just think you could bring in someone there and they could be very. Glenn's done it. We got Gavin Pearson, and he was absolute. And we were really struggling back then. This is the pre-takeover. Gavin Pearce, even post takeover, is absolutely one of the best centre halves I've seen play for the Glens in years. Absolutely brilliant. We've got Keith Cowan in. Now Keith Cowan only came in and played about.
Dear listener, can I just interject here and say yes? I don't truly believe a player called Pierce did play for Glentoran. I have no memory of him at
He
all.
went and played for Dungannon. No, Warren Point. He went and played for Warren Point after the Glens as well. Um,
I think this is the Mandela effect. I'm not quite sure if they were there, but still, just saying what a lot of people are thinking. But yes, sorry, you were in full flow there.
and the other one is Keith Cowan. The Glen scored signed Keith Cowan.
I remember him because he was
Yeah, he
massive.
scored on his debut against Institute, and then he only played about 15 games for the Glens, but he came in the centre half in the Irish Cup final against Ballymena because Gavin Pearce was injured, and he was brilliant. So I think that that is the sort of market where I think that the Crews will be searching. Maybe this player coming towards the end of their career, but has lots and lots of experience, and they could offer him a wage to come in there and shore things up. That's for them. They've got firepower. For me, if I was them, I'd be taking the budget and getting the defender.
An outsider would suggest that a Frankie Vid and his time at the Glens looked to be coming to an end unless things change. Could you see him maybe being one of those options for the Cruise reported down?
Yeah, certainly. Frankie's a very talented player. A player I really liked. Many people are very confused by his exclusion from the Glens. And I think that he could definitely go somewhere and do it. If someone's looking to take him on, what I think is more likely for Frankie is a move to the National League. He's born and bred Bermondsey. Worth noting, he won our Young Player of the Year last year. And so he could definitely do a job with Crusaders. He must have played 40 games last season.
Doesn't exactly solve their problem, because we all know
Young,
Vid can be slightly
oh yeah,
erratic.
young erratic and can and definitely is better if he plays games. So if he plays every single week, he definitely grows into it. Whereas if he comes off the bench or if he's out of the team for a few weeks and comes back in, he can play a wee bit like rabbit in headlights. But the other thing with Frankie is we've seen him play beside Harry Murphy last season, and they really struggled together because it's just too inexperienced. They couldn't lean on each other's experience. Whereas when you see him playing beside like Marcus Keane or Cody Lance Foster, a lot better. And the Crews don't have that because we signed Daniel Armour.
My goodness. Frankie Vid and Harry Murphy playing for Glentoran. There's two boys who don't remember Pokemon Yellow. Carrick Rangers, I think it's a team that, for what they're looking to achieve, actually have a squad that can do things, but in turn, they're probably a few injuries away from being in diffs. Like, for me, it's trying to add a bit of spice that's been lost through Maculitis being gone, right? It doesn't look like he's going to come back this season. Yes, their back line probably has a combined age above 1,000, but I think maybe they just need a bit of energy because they've got players that can do the business, as we saw a bit on Saturday against other teams. There's not many from that side that are really knocking down the door saying we need a replacement for Gibson, Lecky, and others. But you saw from the likes of Snoddy coming in, and even Steele as well. There's room there where if people can come in, they can do something. But it's that bench right now. They could do outside of Wade. They could do with someone a wee bit tricky coming in to just give them an option when perhaps Heatley is injured or off colour.
Yeah, they're defensively not bad. They've got good defensive midfielders, they've got decent defenders, well experienced in there. I think if you're going to pick, if you had to ask me who they were going to sign, if Forsyth was not in a testimonial year at the Cruise, he's got Carrick Rangers written all over him, or Ross Clark, another back sort of old boy. He's just got they're the sort of signings that you see.
I think they're a banger in the summer, but that's just
Yeah,
me.
well, maybe, but I think that Forsyth, I think he's I know he's born and bred in East Belfast, of course. Um, I think that he was a sort of player that they would snap up, and I think that he'd be ideal for them. He really would. But like I say, I don't think it'll be defensive reinforcements. I think if they can find a winger, or another striker, someone just to feed Danny Gibson, then I think that he will. Then they will thrive in the second half of the season a bit more than what, because like I say, if you can stay solid defensively, then scoring goals will help your cause greatly, which they're just not doing enough of. They really aren't.
Say it with me, everybody. Glenavon, striker. They'd scored what 2 goals after 16 games or whatever it's been. I mean they've struggled with it all year. Massive reliance on a Paul McGovern. Maybe that's the type of player that maybe the fact is he's slightly diminutive is not the answer. But if you're Cliftonville, do you go? He's a piece that maybe would like to get in on the ground floor of now. Like looking at Glenavon, they sign all the centre backs and they don't need any more. Midfield is solid enough, but they wouldn't say no to one or two. I quite like actually Corey Smith, and having Peter Campbell shows that they've got a few players that can do things out wide. It's just a striker. I mean, they'll be asking. I don't know if it's really the right move for a Benji McGee or anything, but I think Ferris would be a real statement signing if for some reason he slipped through the cracks of other teams. But it's someone like that. I think you pair them up, especially with McDade going with like do you go, hey look, all here's some cash for Kirk McLaughlin, and we would like to try and keep him for next year, regardless if we're in this division or not.
You know what we should do? We should just scrap the provincial trophies like the County Antrim Shield, the Mid Ulster Cup, and we'll put the likes of Glenavon and Carrick and Ballymena and all those clubs and Dungannon in the round robin tournament, and the winner gets Nathaniel Ferris.
The winner gets reserve striker of Team X.
Yeah, yeah. This is the conversation so far.
It's been Nathaniel
It's just
Ferris.
everyone is like, "Where's Nathaniel Ferris going?" Or Jamie McGonigal, or one of these, or one of Lauren's 15 strikers. It's just continuously. It's the same talking points, but this isn't just a problem in the Irish League, is it? This is a problem in football in general. I find there's not as many goal scorers, and I think it's down to the way young players, are being coached these days. We hear things like false nine creeping in, and things like that, and it's not all just about scoring goals. So I think that we're seeing that now, and Glenavon are another team that need a bit of firepower, someone to pick up the pieces whenever, especially now when McDade is obviously away.
But also, we are seeing teams where if they are doing a bit of business and they're doing well, to a certain point, they aren't able to go through the levels in that. For example, Swan was doing some decent stuff for Anna United, and maybe a team at the bottom of the Premiership might think, let's add him in as either the third striker or the second striker, or just see what he can do, right? But because he's under contract, he just can't be swept away. But he's not doing the business in the Championship where a Carrick or like, give those boys, and it might be 20 grand for striker X. So they just don't have the same easiness of slipping up because of kind of the contracts, and some players are just enjoying being where they are. But it hey.
Well, it's like a Paul McElroy situation
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
It's exactly the same situation, and it is a step up, the Championship, and they might just ruin their career, or in not ruin their career, but ruin their reputation in people's eyes if they make the step up too soon, or if they make the step up whenever they've got a good thing going at that club. And it comes back, Glenavon are in this situation. I was saying about Carrick and how it is so obvious that you look at their defensive record, it's the best in the bottom six. They're absolutely doing really, really well in that regards, but they're not scoring enough goals. And you sort out one, the other one's already there. That's the issue sorted. With Glenavon, they've got 14 centre halves signed in the last year. Like, they've got loads of centre halves signed. They've got loads of defenders. So they're probably not going to reinforce there, but they're leaking so many goals, and it's like, if you put a striker in there, does that solve their problem? Probably not. You know, it's this strange situation where you can talk about all the strikers you want, but they're lacking in a lot of areas, and that's why they are where they are. And a lot of these players have only been signed in the last 12 months. So it's such a difficult situation for them, and I do not envy the job that O'Connor has there. But we have seen that he can get a tune out of players. So whoever he does bring in, then maybe they can achieve the great escape.
I'll wrap this up with a few tweets. Andy says, I think he's talking about Glenavon here, I think we have too many centre backs. How about McClelland for Ferris? Don't know if you'd take that.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's something that we'll be interested in at this point in time. But sure, reach out to the secretary at the Oval. You never know.
Samuel says, probably depends on who returns from injury, which we are pretty much saying. For Linfield, an experienced holding midfielder, yes, pretty much what we said as well. And a centre back would be great, getting greedy. If East is out long term, then another left back is needed, as you were highlighting there. And then Callum talking about the Glens. I think the Glens need a centre back and a midfielder, so he's very much singing from the same hymn sheet as yourself. I would like another attacker, but we notoriously signed Dross in January, so unsure about signing anyone. What's he talking about? We had Cowan, and what was the name of that player that was never really played for you?
Calvin Pierce. But here, I would also like to say we signed Reece Marshall and Conor McManaman in a window once, so it's not always all bad.
And Dave here says, just randomly, enjoy Kick a Match podcast. I'm glad we have it. I really do. It takes a lot of effort. Thank you, mate. We'll look ahead to this week, and it starts on Friday. Larne, Linfield. You say this is going to be an exciting tie, or I might say it's going to be an exciting tie, but of course I'm not, because history has proven to us these games are a bore. But will it be a bore with delight at the end for Larne, or will it be for Linfield? I think it's probably Larne.
I think it's 0-0.
Yeah, well, that's the safest bet, and probably what I'm leaning towards. But I kind of like a late 2-0 win for Larne. Just get the goal with 10 minutes to go and sweep it in again late on, as Linfield try and push forward. Larne are just looking very, very efficient, have nothing to fear, and we're really yet to see Linfield over the past few years deal with these games where they kind of need to come at it and get a victory and be bold. They're rarely bold, and I think Larne have the ability to be bold because they've got the points in the bag and they've got that advantage, and I think this could be a bit of a huge statement win here, 2-0.
I think it's going to be a big game for both teams, certainly, and Lauren being at home will certainly fancy themselves, but I just have a feeling that it's just going to be one of those games that's just they cancel each other out, and it finishes as a solid Friday night 0-0.
dead cat bounce for Ballymena at home against Dungannon Swifts?
I am not convinced by that. No, I think that it's a strange mix of managerial takeover there, isn't it? It's like Patrick McElhaney, Sean O'Neill. Who's actually taking over as the manager? Is it like the
Is Kieran Caldwell the
Kieran Caldwell? You're right, Kieran Caldwell. That'll be interesting. I don't think that Ballymena will get anything here. I think it'll be a cheeky 1-0 to Tungannon.
Yeah, I think Dungannon, as long as they don't get too stuck in the mud up there, I think they'll have way too much for Ballymena, who, regardless, I think will be licking their wounds and struggling to reorientate themselves. And could be interesting of where that leaves Ballymena United based on other results. Coleraine, Carrick, that's a big trip for Carrick. Two difficult teams back to back away from home. You would think as long as Coleraine aren't sitting there 0-0 after an hour, that they should have enough to try and break down that Carrick side.
Yeah,
They're not a good matchup, I don't think, for Carrick.
no, I think a Carrick will be a wee bit a spring in their step after their performance against Linfield. They'll be disappointed they've lost it in the way they did, but I just think Coleraine have too much for Carrick in this game. We've seen it against the Crews last week. I think it'll be more the same here, and I think it'll be 2-0 to Coleraine.
Yeah, it's probably in the similar zone for me. Big clash. Crews host Portadown. Like the big thing here is for Portadown is, can they shut out the Crews? And I don't know if they can, especially away from home.
Yeah, I think that it's gonna I actually have no idea how this one's gonna go. It's certainly an interesting one. You've got the free scoring crews and the ports who just who can play well for 45 minutes and then just go to sleep. But I do think that it'll be a tight enough affair. Just the quality in the two teams is very similar, I think, overall, and I think you're probably looking at maybe a one each.
Yeah, I think it's 1-2 maybe, but I kind of think there is a situation where Crews capitalise on mistakes and maybe run away with this like a 3-0. But yeah, I'm gonna go 2-2. I think if you're from the Portadown perspective, you'll want that to be tighter. Crews will happily take it on if it's a bit more chaos ball. They'll happily if it's open, they'll take the advantage. Glenavon Bangor, an opportunity here for Glenavon at home against, yes, a Bangor side who has been difficult for most teams, but still, I think from a man-to-man point of view, it's it could be fun and games of the story of the weekend if they can get a result. I don't think Bangor go in favourites, but you know what? I think Glenavon going to continue on. I think this is 2-0 Bangor.
Yeah, I
I mean
think that
Glenavon.
it's going to be a game where Glenavon will have a spring in their step. Bangor, of course, played really well last week, but I do think that home that when they play at home, the pitch is a massive leveler, tight ground. They've got a really good support there. I think that they're different at home than they are on the road, and I think that Glenavon are going to win this one 2-1, and I think it's going to make things really interesting as well.
Massively, especially whatever the result of that Crusaders Portadown game is. I'm sure there's Bangor fans thinking, when are we going to get a break here on the predictions? But yeah, maybe you can be laughing come the end of Saturday. And then finally, Glentoran and Cliftonville. I don't know. Usually Cliftonville have kept this tight up the Oval.
Yeah, I think we've had a bit of joy with them at the Oval recently against Cliftonville. I would need to look that up. But I know that last season we beat them early on in the season at the Oval, and you just never see. The most annoying thing about this is it's a double header, and sometimes the first game can impact the second. And no one likes them. Players don't like them. Managers don't like them. And fans don't like them. It's going to be tight. It's going to be nervy, and it's not going to be a great game. I don't think. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go one each. I think I'm gonna play at one each, and yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
Yes, because obviously there's the games in the League Cup and it's at your spot. Yeah, it kind of makes this a really, really odd situation. I'm gonna back you 1-0.
There we go. That's us getting beat.
Yep, that's fair. That's totally fair. I think you'll split it. So if you want to win in whoever wins the cup is getting bait on Saturday.
Right. Okay. Well, I don't know what one I'd rather. Well, your league's your bread and butter to say, but the cup final was a good day out last year, so I would like to make that. I think it trophies are important.
Matthew Brown, thank you so much. You've obviously celebrated a birthday. You'll be celebrating Christmas as we all will in a couple of weeks. Looking forward to Boxing Day. How's the ticketing going down for your boys? It's Windsor this year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's at Windsor. Yeah, tickets sold out official location within about 5 minutes. But they then more tickets got added on. And then they sold it. Basically, the way the ticketing system works is a bit of a shambles. And that, like, if someone has bought a ticket, it's like in Ticketmaster. Sometimes you can go on Ticketmaster and like hours later the ticket pops up because someone's had it in their basket. So it's similar stuff like that happening here. And it took 2 days for it then officially sell out. And it sounds like the club are trying to get additional tickets. Um, you've got an 18,500 seater stadium, and there's probably going to be circa 10,000 fans in the stadium, and they're going to call it sold out. And in my opinion, something needs looked at. There needs to be either some sort of conversation around security costs, there needs to be some sort of conversation around buffer zones and things like that, because I think it's a massive crying shame that we have this huge fixture, which the Glens could sell probably 4,000 plus tickets for this. Linfield could sell probably 10,000 plus tickets for this. We could have 14, 15,000 people in this stadium, and it could be an absolute spectacle. And instead, it's going to be sitting effectively half empty for this massive game. And that's going to be the most disappointing thing, and it won't happen anywhere else in the country.
Well, if it maybe could be that many people there, but the ticket might have to be £25 to pay for all the security costs.
Well, that is something that you might have to look at. You might have to look at maybe the clubs maybe agreeing to front up some sort of money just to get more of their own fans into the ground. Things like that. You need to look at the security costs, I suppose, and seeing what the rules around it actually are. Because ultimately, health and safety decide on how much security is required in that ground, and it seems to be the only ground that really has this issue. But that's just defined by the amount of exits there are and stuff like that. So I think that local council and stuff like that can work with the clubs and see what can be done. But I just think it's a crying shame that if you have this huge stadium and so much potential for a game like this, because build up post COVID, this game has been even more popular than before. And I just think that more can be done to sort of get fans into the ground.
Matthew, a delight as always. Until next time, I'll chat to you soon.
Cheers, Peter.
Now, I hope you didn't forget about that thing I was talking about at the very start of the podcast, where I said that I was going to be doing an event about John McCready McAleary, 100 years on the 3rd of December. It'll be this year, 2025, since his death. Obviously credited with bringing football to this part of the world via Cliftonville. So if you're a Cliftonville fan, better be there. Remember, this event is free to go grab a ticket for. Just make sure you can secure your place, because there's a limited amount, as there is in any event, really, is there? Because it's not online. You have to be there in person, not going to be recorded. It's a fun little panel thing where we're looking back with Barry Flynn and all his historic knowledge. And then we're going to look ahead. Maybe to the next 100 years, if science can help us there. Jared Lola's going to be there. Graham Fitzgerald's going to be there. And oh boy, do I have some questions. And you can ask some questions too, but you got to be there. Go on to the Kick a Match page on Twitter, and you should find a link to get your ticket. And it means you're secured to be place. You can buy me a birthday pint. Or, if you're not able to do that, follow this page on Instagram, Facebook, and or Twitter. Subscribe to the pod on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. See you soon. Bye. Thanks.